Welcome to the latest edition of 100, the Ed Gordon Podcast. Today, a conversation with pastor, activist, and author Jamal Harrison Bryant. Bryant is the senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, a megachurch outside of Atlanta. He was selected to lead the church after the departure and eventual death of controversial leader Bishop Eddie Long. Bryant first came to prominence as pastor of Empowerment Temple in Baltimore, Maryland. He was mentored by many, including the Reverend Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. In their tradition, Bryant has been a fighter for civil rights, but his path on the church road was set long before that. His father is Bishop John Richard Bryant and his mother, the Reverend Cecilia Williams Bryant. They both are prominent in the AME Church, and it was there we started. We hear so much about PKs over the years, but you got a double dose. You know, often when we talk about PKs, we talk about somebody's daddy, but you got it from both ends.
Yes, I am the epitome of everything associated with a preacher's kid. I lived up to every narrative, every trope. I did it. You live under such a microscope and a fish tank that you just fight for your identity and fight to be a rebel without a cause.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Morehouse, brother. I went crazy.
I was going to ask that because, you know, when you're a preacher's kid, there is this sense of having to take on what your parents or your parent has chosen very early on. You know, the expectation is far different. Did it, in fact, impact you in that way?
Absolutely. There's a reason when President Obama came into the White House that his first statement to the press is that children are off limits.
Mm-hmm.
Is that this is me and Michelle, but leave the girls out of it. The church didn't give us that level of grace. Mm-hmm. And so if we weren't singing in the choir, if we were, how come we ain't doing the solo? If we ushering, how come our gloves not on? And so living under that sense of accountability that is not ours is unfair. As a consequence, and embarrassingly, 60% of grown preachers' kids don't go to church.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard something that has haunted me is that preachers' kids feel like the mistress. They get the time that's left over.
Yeah, that the church is the favorite child.
Yes. So living with that is amazing. I took my daughter to FAMU for the early college program last 2 weeks ago. And we were stopped walking by the campus. Hey, Pastor, will you pray for me, Pastor? Are you going to be down here? Funniest story. I took my daughter into Target. She getting last minute stuff. In the next aisle over, I'm hearing a mother scolding her daughter saying, "Did you pack your Bible?" So the daughter says, "No, I didn't pack my Bible." She says, "You see Pastor Bryant in here with his daughter? I know she packed her Bible."
Mm-hmm.
I looked at my daughter with a knowing glance saying, "You ain't packed no Bible, did you?" She said, "I sure didn't, but I got a Bible app on my phone. Does that count?" I said, "That counts." But already just living in that kind of space it can be a lot.
Often preachers' kids do one of two things. They run to the pulpit or they run away from the pulpit.
Right.
What was the magnet that ultimately drew you to it?
When I finished Morehouse, I went to Duke to be a lawyer. Bernice King, 4 years before I got out of college, she had created a program at Emory for law and divinity. I get accepted into Duke. And I said, "Hey, did y'all hear what they did at Emory? Can we do that same program?" They said, "Oh, sure." I always saw myself in ministry, but my mentors was Reverend Jackson,
mm-hmm.
Reverend Sharpton. So I knew I was a preacher, but didn't think I was going to be a pastor. So I thought the street would be my sanctuary, as it were. Ed, I got into real estate law. You know how your 8th grade teacher tells you you always gonna need math? I didn't believe her. I sat in there, I said, Lord, I hear the call. I went across campus, withdrew out of the law school, and stayed in divinity school. But I knew I didn't want to pastor. I knew it. I mean, down to my gut. So when I got out of divinity school, I was National Youth Director to NAACP, which is where I first met you, under Christ and Fume. I tell this story here. People never believe me. We're at our national convention in Charlotte, and Fume, who is now congressman, gets laryngitis. So he asked me to give the state of the Black America address. I'm 27 years old. I give the address. It was the greatest moment of my life. Next day, I'm on the front page of USA Today. I get off the stage, Ed, and waiting for me at the bottom of the steps is Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory grabs me by my collar. I'd never met Dick Gregory a day in my life. I only know him because my parents had records of his in our basement. Grabs me by my collar, throws me up against the wall, and says, Negro, that ain't the word he used.
That ain't the word he used.
He says to me, I'm startled. I'm thrown off. I'm going off in my speech, trying to figure out what I said that was wrong. He said, Ed, when I was coming up, Black people, when they were in trouble, would call on two names, Jesus and the NAACP. He said, your generation doesn't call on either. That Gregory says to me, young man, you are out of order. You are supposed to be a pastor. I broke down crying. You know Dick Gregory as well as I. Dick Gregory didn't go to church. He didn't leave in church. He didn't have nothing positive to say about Black preachers. And 7 months after that, Ed, is when I started my church in Baltimore. Here's what's crazy. Dick Gregory came to my first Sunday of the church that I started. I'm going to give the benediction. Dick Gregory walks into the pulpit, takes the microphone, and says, this N-word is supposed to be in this position. He says, for my whole career, I'll never forget, he said, 40 years I'm on the stage. We always sold tickets. You had to buy tickets before you went in. In church, they let you pay on the way out. Dick Gregory, for my first Sunday, raised the offering for my service. I tell people it wasn't my dad, it wasn't T.D. Jakes, it wasn't Bishop Charles Blake. It was Dick Gregory that called me into the pastorate. So my journey has been a different one from the door all the way in.
Let me ask you this: you touched on it throughout that. You know, it's interesting because I want to get into how you see today's church and how young people especially view it. But what's interesting is you are a very learned man, but as you and I both know, for years, particularly in the South, many of the preachers who held churches did not necessarily, certainly didn't go to college, certainly, you know, had not had the opportunities that you were afforded throughout your life. There's a sense of how preachers were viewed, but we know all humans are flawed. When you went into the ministry, did you think about the idea of what that was going to be? I suspect you couldn't have known how large the intrusion, quite frankly, is until you did it.
Yeah, you have to understand, mega churches are just a generation old. Let me put it in context. Hip hop is older than mega churches. So I never saw myself in a new birth. I saw myself doing well in an AME church somewhere, number one. Number two, while I went to Morehouse, I never saw myself pastoring in Georgia. I'm from Baltimore, so I saw myself Maryland and up. So maybe DC, maybe New York, maybe Philly. And so I had no idea of what it is that I was walking into, and I assuredly didn't see myself in this place. You, a couple of weeks ago, interviewed and did a story about Bishop Jakes. And when I lecture at seminaries, I tell them that when Dr. King went to Montgomery, he was the youngest pastor in that city. They threw on him the mantle of leading the Montgomery bus boycott. But here's an asterisk that's important, is that he had already finished his doctorate degree. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So all of the pastors, Ed, in town said, well, we're going to call him Dr. King. I'm going to be doctor. Mm-hmm. So that's how Baptist preachers became doc. Mm-hmm. Fast forward a generation. Bishop Jakes comes onto the mainstream, and everybody then becomes bishops because he set the standard for that. When you were growing up, there wasn't no Baptist bishops. We didn't know apostolics were regulated to storefront churches, not on CBS News or BET or Time Magazine, for God's sake. So it set the trend for it. I'm saying to it that the education issue was one of two issues. Either they didn't have any, or the preacher and the teacher were the only educated people in the community. Mm-hmm. It was one of those two variables that were at stake. I am a third generation, not just preacher, but I'm a third generation seminarian, which is very rare. Mm-hmm. My grandfather went to Payne Seminary after going to Wilberforce, I'm going to say in 1940. And so that then changed the trajectory of our family and higher education.
Give me a sense of how you see preaching today. Yeah. Like everything, we all want to be, those of us who have had the spotlight and been deemed celebrity, or what social media has done, and it's made to a degree everyone a celebrity. Mm-hmm. Give me a sense of how you see your vocation now and this sense of celebrity preacher, which frankly, you would be deemed as one.
Yeah, I think that I'm at a place of pause because you're hearing modern day preaching is a lot of motivational speeches. There's a lot of the self-help section of Barnes and Noble, mm-hmm. Not a whole lot of scripture. And so in a lot of churches, they have replaced Bible study with midweek service. Notice a small little nuance, I'm now 52, is that my grandfather had a study. This generation has an office. Those are two different things. The office is where I'm doing business. The study is where I'm doing preparation. And so I think that in large measure, where in the words of the Apostle Paul, we're having to be all things to all people. Mm-hmm. But you're not hearing the likes of Jeremiah Wright that's calling America into accountability. Mm-hmm. You're not hearing, of course, voices hither and yon. But in large measure, where was the resounding outcry of the Black church of the Supreme Court gutting out affirmative action? Where is it that even for young preachers crying out about where is the Supreme Court on canceling the cancellation of student debt? Mm-hmm. So there's got to be a mobilization that has to happen. That we're not just looking to the likes of my mentor, Reverend Sharp, but the young lions, as it were, really need to roar. And I'm not hearing that really reverberate in the community as we have in days gone by.
How much of that would you place on the idea that, and again, I don't want to paint this brush for preachers only, but the idea of building one's brand, the idea of building celebrity, but has taken some of that space? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly that I think Black leadership, and this is my words, not yours, I think Black leadership has failed of late. I think the Black church has failed of late. I think the Black community has failed of late of looking at the things that undergirded us and kept us, standing. And I think we don't see what we're going to have to pay for down the line until we figure out how to fix it. And it will not be a quick fix.
Yeah, I don't know if I give them a failing mark as much as I'm putting them in summer school. They're in danger. I am enlivened when I see people like Cori Bush out of St. Louis, who is coming. I am reinvigorated when I see Wes Moore out of Maryland coming through. And so I'm hearing the footsteps of those who are coming. Of course, we can do more, but I don't know if we're altogether fair. When you look at our dear sister in Houston, who is sounding the alarm, taking the mantle from John Conyers about reparations. So I don't know if it's failing, but I think that we got to play different. And we're playing checkers while they playing chess. And I think that we've got to move past symbolic victories and look for what is the substantive movement. Many years ago, Roland Martin challenged the Congressional Black Caucus and said, what's the ask? What are we asking to have happen? If Biden gets another 4 years and Black women have continuously saved the Democratic Party, what are we asking? We done got a Supreme Court seat now. We got a vice presidential seat now. But what is the legislative agenda? And I think that we've got to put our foot on the gas for it.
Let me say this before I move on. I would say that I would continue to give them a failing grade. There is a difference between failing and failed. And I think that's the distinction I would make. I would not suggest to put these people out to pasture. I think that they, in fact, have, their best efforts and their best want for our community at heart. Yes. I do not see them as failed, but I do see them as failing. And I include I include us in it in terms of the layman. We're all failing.
Yes.
All right, let me get off my soapbox. We talk politics there. You at one point thought about running for Congress. You ultimately suspended your campaign.
Yes.
Do you still have an inkling? Do you still get that calling?
No, that phone number has changed. No, when I got to New Birth, I don't have time to do anything else at all. I inherited $32 million worth of debt and almost 10,000 seats I got to fill. So my church is a congressional district by itself. And so I really believe I'm in the place and in the space where it is that I belong. We've got a whole lot of Georgians who are really on the front line doing it. I am proud to be under the leadership of Raphael Warnock. I am proud to be under Mayor Andre Dickens. I'm grateful that Stacey Abrams left a blueprint before going to Howard University of what it is that we need to do. That grassroots mobilization is still effective. And she did it by getting a hair's throw away from the governor's mansion. And so I feel that the leadership here in Georgia is really leading well.
Let me try this. I've talked to many a candidate that ultimately ran for the White House. The first time I asked them, their thought was, oh, no, I just want to be the best, whatever position they were in at that time. But everybody knew. Beyond the busyness, my question is the burning still there, though? That's a different question.
No. It is not, because I am doing congressional work with a congregation. We just we're getting ready to break ground on 150 mini homes that I am only letting millennial couples move in as a standard of going back to a model of a starter house. If your starter house ain't gonna have a pool, it ain't gonna have no in-laws. But stay in here until you get your legs about you. In October, Ed, we're opening up a holistic health clinic. We are looking at doing the first of its kind senior housing for seniors who have custody of their grandchildren. And so I have the burden to transform a community, but I'm seeing how I can do it with this congregation.
And I would suggest that often it's easier to do it without the shackles that politics brings to you.
Yes.
Along that lines, you were a part of the profile that I did on TD Jakes. He has, I think, been the best example of how to run a business, run a church, and keep them separate. The church is a business in and of itself, but the idea of two lanes. Is that something that you will continue to grow on? You mentioned the housing here, but how much do you want to take that template?
Oh, I'm taking it wholesale. He's gonna have to sue me for plagiarism. I got the book and I'm tearing out every page of it. No, I think he is the 21st century quintessential Renaissance man. Anybody from my generation forward who wants to be relevant in ministry is going to have to cheat off his paper. You're going to have to see it. I mean, because he's doing it and doing it so seemingly effortlessly that at whatever stage that somebody is in ministry, they're going to have to double dribble.
How much do you look at the state of the church? Again, we've touched on this, but the state of today's church. What do you want to see differently? What do you think that the church, the Black church, is not doing that they should be doing? And what do you think they're doing and doing well?
Number one, the synagogues after the pandemic did not rush to reopen. The mosque did not rush to reopen. The Baha'i temple did not rush to reopen. The church did. Jesus used the word go. The Black church uses the word come. Those are two different things. And I think that the church is going to have to really bolster up the teaching of the congregants of how do I have a personal life? How do I set up an altar at home? How do I commune with God when I can't get the pastor on the phone? And so we've got to move from membership to discipleship. That's number one. Number two, our church grew in the pandemic because during the pandemic, I gave 1 million boxes of groceries. People were pulling up to our church every Saturday, getting groceries. Food desert everywhere. Food shelters out of food everywhere. And we did it. And people were pulling up onto our campus saying, "Are you the pastor?" I said, "Yes." I said, "When y'all open, I'm coming back here." I'm an 80s baby. 80s church, you got to have a good choir. Rev got to be able to say it. Something for the kids on Saturday. And now this era is looking, what are you giving back? Not how good is your service, how good is your serving? And I think that the churches are going to have to come out of the stained glass windows and go to street corners. I think the church is doing well. The church, I want to put a different language on the branding. You gave it a failing. I want to say that the church, Ed, is in puberty. Our voice is changing. We got acne right now. In the words of my grandmother, we smell like outside. So we are in a place of culture changes every 4 years. Church culture changes every 20. So the average church is 15 years behind. So most churches, Ed, that you're going to drive past or go through or visit, they pat themselves on the back because they on Facebook. The kids done left Facebook. So the overwhelming majority of Black churches are not on TikTok. And so we got to figure out how do we become relevant and move in that direction. So I think that what the pandemic did is it pushed the churches to embrace technology, to even know what AI is, to make pastors, I don't know, invest in a ring light You talked about how now, because of social media, anybody can be a celebrity or influencer. And 15 years ago, if you would have interviewed me and we talked about, quote, celebrity preachers, those preachers were preachers who were on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everybody is a televangelist because everybody is online. And so there's another generation who's not on TBN or not on the Word Network, not on Daystar, but they have figured out how to do reels. They have figured out how to go on Thread. They have figured out how to take quotes from the sermon and package it. And so I'm excited to see where the church is going with millennials and Gen Xers and now Gen Zs who are coming to the fore, who are remodeling the church, that I don't have to wear a robe to preach, but that I can preach in jeans. My grandmother would have had an asthma attack if she saw what I was preaching in.
What do you tell those who have not come up with the reverence that you and I grew up with for the minister, for the church, for the preacher, who, see them as maybe we should have always seen them as very human, very flawed. The idea that, as I mentioned before, the personal life is out there. It's very humbling.
Yes.
Ministers didn't have to be as humble as they have to be today, years ago.
Right.
You have faced your own issues and situations where I suspect personally humbling for you.
Yes.
What did you learn from those things? And what do you tell people who may still look at not Jamal Bryant, but paint with the broad brush, all who stand in the pulpit as hypocritical?
Yeah, I think it is humbling to know it is not me. You take no glory for yourself. Roman emperors, when they ran through town on chariots, to keep them humble, they would have somebody ride in the chariot with them, that while the crowd is screaming and yelling, they would whisper in their ear, "You are mortal. You are human." And I think that pastors have to realize that while I operate in the sacred and in the supernatural, that I am human. God has saddled me that my successes are always the same size of my failure. I'm never able to get away. Whatever it is, I got to own it, or else he's going to lease it wholesale. And so I think that it is a reverence for the office, but understanding the God of the office. That my responsibility is not to win people to me, but to point people back to God. And I think where people blunder and where they slip, where they fall is they drink the Kool-Aid. Or the words of Biggie Small, they high on their own supply. To know, that it ain't Jamal who's building this church in Atlanta. Jamal got a GED. Jamal had a baby. Jamal had a divorce. So people got to look at me through the prism of my failures and say, Lord, God's still using him? He still got the nerve to speak on God's behalf? And I think when it is that we move into that direction, it is not the greatness of the individual, but the awesomeness of the God we serve.
Before I let you go, I want to speak on one of your next projects, which you hope will be ultimately a huge one, behind you, as I have behind me.
Yes.
Some beautiful art. You and I had a conversation when we were together just about art and the importance of it in history, in our lives, and what it could and should be to our community. Talk to me about what you want to do at the church and what you're putting together.
Thank you. I woke up a couple of months ago with the epiphany that the modern Black church has replaced art with LED walls. There's no iconography. There is no images. There are no stories. And there are no stained glass windows. And so art has been lost. I read somewhere that liturgical dancers are the only place in the planet where there is no diet regimen, where there is no health requirement. And I think that the art of dance, spoken word, my sister's a spoken word poet, is that we don't have spoken word artists in church anymore, as they were in the 70s or even in the early 80s. And so we're curating in our church in New Birth Cathedral in Stonecrest, Georgia. We're 25 minutes outside of Atlanta, is the largest Black land-owning church in America. And I sit with a sanctuary and a gymnasium. And I'm transforming that space, as a lot of mega churches are going to need to do in this post-pandemic reality, into a art gallery, which we are hoping will be the largest Black art gallery in America, second to the Smithsonian. And so we're bringing diasporic artists together, where we're not just going to show art, but we're going to encourage the community that every Black family should own a piece of Black art in their home. And so we're hoping in the next 90 days to open it and set the standard, not just for established artists, but for emerging artists, that you come to church not just to worship, but to understand our culture at a greater depth.
And in a real sense, it will act as a gallery / museum to a great degree.
Yes, right? Yes.
You'll have a historic piece. I know you've been over in Africa, looking at art there and talking with the artists.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. So what was typical, the bookstore that churches have, will now be a place where people can get prints, as well as they'll be able to scan the code in our gallery, and we'll be able to buy it directly from the artist, as well as we will have a section for young artists. I am so proud Clark Atlanta University is the only HBCU where you can major in art. And it's right here in Atlanta. So we're going to use their students as interns, and we're going to house some of their pieces, as well as showcase artists who are notable, who will have residency there on our property.
Well, great. We'll look forward to that, man. I am an art lover, as you know, and we'll certainly look forward to the curation of, all the talent that's out here.
We're bringing you back. I need you.
Being an outlet. Well, I told you, I'm there. One other thing before we leave, you told me something the other day that I didn't even know, that I actually conducted your first national interview. You're so eloquent, and you're an OG now, but this is when you were a young buck.
Let me help you. This is going to prove it to you, because this advice you gave to me my first interview at BET. You taught me how to sit on my vents so that my jacket would not rise. So my jacket wouldn't rise up and buckle over on my shoulder. You gave it to me years ago, and I still hold on to it. So thank you for giving me my first opportunity. I was doing a project with the NAACP called "Stop the Violence, Stop the Love." So you brought me in because I, along with Russell Simmons, was doing the mediation for the East Coast West Coast rap rivalry.
Right.
Yeah, that's how far back we go.
Yeah, man. Hey, man, always good to see you. I appreciate your time, man.
Thank you for your mentorship. Thank you for your leadership. And thank you for always showing that there is a higher bar and a greater standard of ebony excellence. I'm grateful for you.
I appreciate it. Another big thanks to Pastor Bryant. If you're ever in the Atlanta area, go check out his Sunday service at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. 100 is produced by Ed Gordon Media and distributed